All right. Thank you everyone for being here tonight. Like I said before, I am Lindsay McBride. I'm the Adult and Family Program Manager here at North Cascades Institute. It is our privilege for you to be here in our class of From Snow to Ash, How Increased Wildfires Threaten North Cascades, Canada Lynx. Um, as you arrived, hopefully you saw our slideshow of some of the offerings that North Cascades has and some of the landscapes that you find in the North Cascades mountains. The North Cascades Institute is a conservation nonprofit founded in 1986 that uses education as a tool to conserve the natural world. Our mission is to inspire environmental stewardship through transformative learning experiences in nature. We offer programs for people of all ages and backgrounds to explore, enjoy, and engage in the land, the people, and the ecosystem of the Pacific Northwest. And hopefully have the desire to care and protect the special place. Some of our programs are Mountain School for fifth graders. They come up for 3 days. We have our youth leadership adventures for teenagers that do backpacking trips into the mountains, engage in conversations about leadership and climate change and climate solutions, and a suite of programs for adult and families, including this virtual class today. I want to take this time to introduce our instructor. Carmen leads the home range. I always get this switched up. The home range wildlife research. Great. Research mission to conduct wildlife science and directly inform the conservation and management of species. She is dedicated to examining the impacts of climate change and human development on wildlife, as well as finding ways to mitigate their impacts. Carmen's background is in mammal ecology, habitat, and management, where she's worked in a diversity of landscapes, including Southeast United States and the Alberta Rocky Mountains. Carmen holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Wildlife Management and Conservation from Humboldt State University, and a Master's of Science in Biology from the University of British Columbia, and is currently living in Winthrop. So at this time, I am excited to hand it over to Carmen to teach us about Canada Lynx in the Cascades.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Lindsay. It's really great to be here talking about wildfire and lynx and the ecology of the North Cascades is something that I get really excited about and could go on and on about. So I'm eager to have this opportunity to speak with you all. It's always great to hang out with a like-minded group. So with that, I will start to share my screen and hopefully this will go smoothly. Okay. Are we seeing my first slide?
It is here. Yes, we can see that.
Awesome. Okay, and everybody bear with me when we tested this earlier today. There was a little bit of a lag as I switched slides, so I'll try to be cognizant of that. But it may take a little more time. I'll try not to get ahead of the slides. Um, all right. Well, as Lindsay said, I'm a wildlife biologist here in Washington State, and I have dedicated my entire higher education and career to wildlife conservation. It's something that I'm very passionate about. I'm really invested in it. And so I'm really excited to share some of that passion and excitement with you here today. So I'm also a co-founder of Home Range Wildlife Research. We're a small nonprofit based in Winthrop of the North Cascades. Home Range was really born out of our dedication to conservation through forwarding wildlife research. And it was born out of our strongly held values to care for and help steward Western landscapes and all of the animal and plant life that make the West and specifically the North Cascades such a rich and vibrant place. And so that's something that we definitely share with the North Cascades Institute and all of you here today, I'm sure. So our mission at Home Range really centers around three focus areas for advancing wildlife conservation. We conduct, first of all, high quality research that's really aimed at addressing urgent conservation issues and making sure that our research outcomes are going to reach the decision makers and the managers and really translate into on the ground conservation actions. Besides research, we also have a education arm of the nonprofit. And so we work to educate aspiring biologists in an effort to increase accessibility to this field and to ensure that we've got a really strong future for wildlife research. And then third, we engage our local community here in the Methow Valley, where Winthrop is, with outreach and community science projects. And this is really under the belief that communities want to be involved in caring for their backyard landscapes and that conservation actions are best supported and have the best outcomes when the communities in the area understand the science behind them. But today, of course, I'm here to talk about our research pillar and specifically our flagship project, which is our Lynx and Wildfire in the North Cascades research. This is a project that's really dedicated to finding conservation solutions for this species of wildcat whose population is really struggling in the contiguous US. It's a rare and elusive cat here in the North Cascades. If any of you have ever seen one, I would love to hear that. That's a really special thing to get to see because they are few and far between here. So, as I mentioned, they are struggling here in the contiguous US. And in Washington, that is due in large part because of climate change and the increasing wildfires that we're experiencing as a result of climate change affecting their boreal forest biome. So let's see, are slides keeping up with me? Are you guys seeing a map?
Yeah, it's looking great. It's keeping up with you.
Cool. Oh, great. Okay. So, just a little overview of lynx in the lower 48. These days, lynx populations in the contiguous US are really limited to just five areas. So, we've got Maine, Minnesota, we have a reintroduced population in Colorado, and we've got northwestern Montana and the North Cascades. You can see on this map that there is habitat outlined in red for the greater Yellowstone area. While that's great habitat for lynx, it's not currently, it doesn't support a breeding population, and so that's why I didn't list that one. The core of lynx range is really up in Canada and Alaska in that boreal forest biome. Now, here in Winthrop, Home Range Wildlife Research is based in the heart of Washington's lynx habitat. So the North Cascades are one of the few areas, as you can see here, in the lower 48 where those deep snows and the thick boreal forests of Alaska and Canada kind of snake south before they transition into more southerly environments. And so while the Pacific Northwest is more generally in a coniferous forest biome, specifically these high elevations of the North Cascades can support boreal forests similar to those of the north. And deep snow is what lynx are adapted to. It's part of what makes them so unique and different from our other North American wildcats. So the most obvious of their deep snow adaptations are their giant feet relative to their size and weight. This is called foot loading. So their feet can act as snowshoes and allow them to efficiently move and hunt in the snowy winter by floating on top of the snow because of the size of the feet compared to their weight. This contrasts, say, a animal such as a bobcat, which is about the same weight as a lynx, but they have much smaller feet relative to the size of their body. And so they just punch right through the snow, which makes it really hard to make a living in the winter in deep snow. So really with their uniquely large, I always think they look like Muppet feet, lynx have carved out a niche in these deep snow environments where they have the competitive advantage. And importantly, these large feet allow lynx to chase and catch their primary prey, which is snowshoe hares. Snowshoe hares make up almost the entirety of lynx diet, so that they're really tightly tied to and reliant upon snowshoe hares to survive. Now, in turn, snowshoe hares require thick stands of this boreal forest because these habitats provide lots of branches that are close to the forest floor and can provide hiding cover from predators and provide access to the evergreen needles and branch tips that the snowshoe hares eat. And so because snowshoe hares live in thick boreal forests, that's also where lynx live. So to sort of sum this up, lynx need deep snow environments with thick boreal forests where they have the advantage with their giant feet over other predators to hunt and eat snowshoe hares. Now, the North Cascades has some of that habitat, and so we do have lynx, but it's not many. In fact, lynx here were listed as federally threatened across the contiguous U.S. In the year 2000, and then in 2016, our Washington population of lynx was listed by the state as endangered. In fact, recent population size estimate numbers that are probably less than 100 individuals in Washington. So this leaves Washington lynx in a really precarious place at risk of local extinction. Now, to understand one of the main reasons why Washington lynx are in such a precarious place, I'm going to bring on another important player to this deep snow, boreal forest, snowshoe hare scene that's so important to lynx. And that player is increasing wildfires. So understanding wildfires and their role in ecosystems, their relationships with lynx is a lot more complicated than just fire is good or fire is bad. And so to explain this, for the next few minutes, I'm going to give just a brief history of fire in the North Cascades boreal forest. And this history can be loosely categorized into three wildfire eras. We've got the historic fire era, the fire suppression era, and then we've got our modern megafire era, which is the era we are in now. So starting with the historic fire regime, we've always had a really lively fire regime in our high elevation forests of the North Cascades. This is a photo that paints a picture of what this historic, very lively fire regime once burned like and what its role was. We're looking at a panoramic view taken in 1936. And what is important here to key in on is the diversity of forest ages and forest heights and thicknesses and also non-forest areas present on that landscape. This patchwork of different burned and regrowing and mature forests were created by very frequent small fires happening. I kind of think of it as just this regular pitter-patter of fires that really textured the landscape. Now, for wildlife, this meant that there was a rich mosaic of forest types and non-forest areas that were constantly sort of shifting over time as fires burned here and then fires burned there and forest patches grew back. And so while habitat patches may have been ephemeral and dynamic, there was basically always some of each forest type available on that landscape so that each creature with its particular habitat needs was supported. Now, this patchwork of different forest habitats is the landscape that lynx historically lived on. And so presumably, even though fires were regularly creating areas of non or very open forest, there was still enough of that thick forest structure on the landscape that snowshoe hares and thus lynx were supported. Now, in addition to creating a mosaic of habitat for wildlife, all those small fires worked to dot the landscape with natural fuel breaks. So areas of ground like this one here that had recently burned, the fuels had been consumed. And so these spots could slow and really limit subsequent fires spread and heat. So these small fires created a negative feedback loop wherein recent fires were limiting future fires. So this historic fire regime was really self-limiting. Now, this constant pitter-patter of small fires was not at the exclusion of big fires. Some years, climate conditions were such that a really big fire would get rolling and affect these large swaths of the landscape. But again, all of those previous small fires had created this varied fuel bed so that even when large fires burned, they did so with less heat and with more what's called pyrodiversity. So meaning that some areas were lightly burned, other patches were skipped entirely. Some places were just torched by high severity, really hot fire behavior. And that's when we see those stands where most trees have been killed. Those are high severity burn areas. And so in this way, the landscape was highly heterogeneous, not only among different age burn scars, but even within a single large burn scar. So to just sort of distill this down in the context of lynx, we think the historic fire regime did two things. One, it created this patchwork of different forest habitats that provided enough of the thick forest structure that hares and lynx need. And two, it safeguarded against catastrophic lynx habitat loss to really big hot fires burning too much forest cover over a short time frame. So that negative feedback loop was really important in sustaining lynx habitat over time. Well, the historic fire regime began to change about 100, 150 years ago when human actions began to limit wildfires. In an effort to save valuable timber, in the West, we started getting really good at suppressing fires in about the 1940s. And hundreds of fire starts in the North Cascades lynx habitat were put out. This essentially snuffed out that natural pitter-patter of fires. And so by excluding fire from the landscape, those forests were allowed to grow and fill in, leveling up and homogenizing. So gone was this patchwork of different forest and non-forest habitats, and gone was that negative feedback loop as fuels accumulated and those natural fire breaks filled in. So the end result is this continuous fuel bed that is primed to spread fire and build up to a more uniformly hot and severe fire. So here again is that photo taken in 1936 on top. It's showing a rich patchwork of the historic fire era versus a modern photo taken from the same spot showing how much that forest has filled in during the suppression era. These photos are quite striking in showing that fill-in. Now, the suppression era ended for us in the early 2000s. At this point, we began essentially the perfect storm. We've got the loaded and uninterrupted fuel beds created by the suppression era, and we're starting to get hotter, drier, and windier summers. The conditions mean fires are burning bigger, hotter, and more frequently, and are often beyond our firefighting capabilities. So the days of being able to rely on, excuse me, to rely on fire suppression are essentially gone. These are megafires, or fires that burn over 100,000 acres. This is not that pitter-patter and occasional large fire of the historical era. This is really more of a deluge. Excuse me, I'm getting over a little cold, so I've got a bit of a frog. So further, these megafires are burning over more uninterrupted, thick fuel beds. And so they're burning with less of that pyrodiversity. Instead, they're burning at a more even, high severity with less areas of light burning or skipping. And fires that burn evenly are going to regrow more evenly and into a young forest with low diversity in its fuel bed, which sets that burn scar up to burn again in a similarly unfettered and high severity way. So we've really gone from the historical fire regime, where infrequent small fires controlled future fires, to the megafire era, where in these large, high severity fires beget large, high severity fires. So now, what does this all mean for lynx? Here we're looking at Washington critical lynx habitat. It's shown in the gray. And then we see in the yellow, these just couple of fires that burned between 1970 and 1999 at the tail end of the suppression area. So with the exception of these few, which really at this point look pretty cute, little fires, we've got lots and lots of mature forest. Lynx did well in this fire suppression area since, or sorry, this fire suppression landscape, because most mature forests can be that thick forest habitat that hares and thus lynx can use. But this is our current megafire landscape. So again, lynx habitats in the dark gray, and then the orange shapes are the fires that have burned between the year 2000 and now. So the suppression era has literally backfired on us in combination with climate change. The era of megafires really presents a big problem for lynx because recent high severity burn areas are essentially forestless. And so in the years after a hot fire kills most or all of the trees in a forest patch, that patch can't support hares and lynx. And by years, I'm talking 15, 20 or more years, however long it takes for that forest to regrow. And our landscape is skewing heavily now towards these recent high severity burn areas. And this is one of the biggest reasons why lynx were uplisted in this state to endangered. Because the worry is that if enough area burns in a really short time frame, lynx won't have enough of that thick boreal forest left in the North Cascades to sustain their population. And so the trajectory that we're headed on with these megafires is pushing lynx towards extinction in Washington. Now, the threat of increasing megafires to lynx is daunting. It's something that I personally lose a lot of sleep over. But recent work in the wildfire ecology field is showing us that we do have an option for reining these fires in. Basically, by using forest treatments to reinstate that historic patchwork, aka that negative feedback loop, we could bring fire resilience back to this landscape, even under the dramatic climate conditions of our times. So by using prescribed fire, using some mechanical thinning, we can reestablish those natural fire breaks, sort of like fire speed bumps, to slow future fires down. And I'm not talking about forest treatments that are just in those areas that haven't burned yet. Because older forests are not the only age of forest that can offer the thick cover that hares and lynx need. Oftentimes, young forest stands can come up really thick and provide that kind of forest cover for snowshoe hares and lynx as well. These young forests, they just need to get tall enough that even with 4 or 5 feet of snow, there's still plenty of tree cover poking up for hares. And so you can see in this picture, my colleague Anna Makowitz, she's out in our study area in this young lodgepole pine forest stand. And if you'll notice in the snow around her, it's just littered with snowshoe hare tracks. So this is on the one hand really good news for lynx since we've got a lot of burn areas that are starting to regrow. However, just about the time that these regrowing forests are getting tall and thick enough to make really good snowshoe hare and lynx habitat, they're also aging into being great fire habitat, so at risk of reburning. And remember what we talked about before, which is that large, high severity burns beget large, high severity burns. So, lynx in their habitat, whether it's mature forest or young forest, just can't seem to catch a break under this mega fire regime. So, if we're to also limit the loss of this young forest habitat to megafires, we also need to reinstate that patchwork, that negative feedback loop back into these areas as well. And so looking back at this map, we can see the importance of reinstating fire resilience into these young regenerating forest habitats that burned in huge mega fires at a high severity. And that's because young forest is a lot of what is up and coming on our landscape at this point. So we've got some hope here of reining in mega fires with forest treatments. But of course, there is a catch, which is that reducing fuels on the landscape, so thinning or prescribed burning, could, in many cases, mean reducing the amount of thick forest cover that lynx also need. So this might sound like we're then left between this rock and a hard place. But if we can understand how lynx use habitats on a landscape impacted by megafires, we might be able to take some lynx habitat for fuels reduction, but do it in a really smart way, in an informed way, and in a planned way, and in such a way as to minimize those immediate effects to lynx while we're then ensuring that we're managing to reduce the risk of megafire and catastrophic habitat loss for the longevity of lynx. So it's this balance between minimizing immediate effects to lynx while ensuring we're reducing the risk of megafires for long-term lynx habitat conservation. Basically, we need to find out how we can take some lynx habitat to save lynx habitat. The problem is that we know very little about how lynx are using habitat on this landscape impacted by megafires. And so managers don't have the information that they need to treat this landscape in such a way that it meets both of the objectives of lynx habitat conservation and fire resilience. But getting that information so that managers can carefully take some habitat to save lynx habitat is exactly our goal with the Home Range Wildlife Research Lynx and Wildfire Project. We're working to learn to find out what burned habitats lynx use, what arrangements and what amounts of these habitats they need, and just as important, what regenerating habitats, forests, lynx aren't getting much value from. So in other words, these are the answers that we really need if we're going to bump North Cascades lynx off their current trajectory towards local extinction and conserve their place as what I think is one of the most special and unique members of the North Cascades ecosystem. Easier said than done. How do we go about getting these answers? Well, the upshot of having had so many mega fires in the past 20 years is that we have a great study area. And we have had begun to suspect in 2020 or so that some of these earliest mega fires that burned in lynx habitat had started to regrow enough that lynx could again make at least some use of them. And specifically, we had our eye on the 2006 tripod burn. So that's the burn on the right hand of the screen in that yellow color. It burned most of what was once considered the best lynx habitat in the state. It's now about 20 years old. And several years ago, indeed, we did start to see some lynx use in this area again. And so we knew that in this tripod burn scar, we had this incredible opportunity to learn what habitats lynx use on a megafire landscape. Now, to get at these burned habitat use questions, we began doing several things. One, we started backtracking lynx in the snow. So what that means is basically we go out into the field in the winter and we look for lynx tracks in the snow. Once we locate one, you can follow, and we follow in the reverse direction that the lynx went. We wouldn't want to follow the lynx and risk catching up with them and disturbing them. So we go in the direction from which they came. And this is to get at fine scale habitat use. So as we're following these lynx tracks, we're recording the habitats that are using immediately around them as they move through the landscape. The other really important thing that we can get at that way is their behavior, and specifically, where are lynx hunting and where are lynx hunting successfully? That's going to be the best of the best, the creme de la creme of habitat, right? That's a primary need, is to get food. And so here you can see one of our grad students, Christine Phelan, and she's following those lynx tracks that start in the upper left-hand corner of the photo and then lead out to the right-hand side of the photo. This is hard work. I'm really proud of the amount of ground our crews have traveled in winter on snowshoes following lynx. We've also got a trail camera study going, and this is to look at how lynx in burned areas are interacting with other carnivores. There's concern that climate change is impacting that snowpack, that light fluffy snow that lynx are able to move on, but other similar sized animals are not. Where there's worry that with climate change, snowpack is getting denser, and that could sort of open up, which has traditionally been sort of the realm of the lynx, to other carnivores that could potentially compete with them. And this may be further impacted by whether the area is burned or not burned, since those environmental factors can also affect snowpack because they may be blocking or not blocking solar radiation and wind, and some of these effects that can determine what the snowpack density is like. And then really at the core of this study is collaring lynx. This is where we're really getting a huge amount of data. It's taking a huge effort, but it's really one of the jackpots of all data collection techniques for rare carnivores. So basically, collars are fitted to individual animals that collect really accurate GPS locations as that animal moves around its habitat. So this is how we can learn in detail how these lynx live on a megafire landscape. Of course, this is easier said than done. It takes a lot of hard work. It takes persistence and grit to get to this moment that you're seeing here in the photo of capturing a rare carnivore and outfitting it with a GPS collar. This was one of the first lynx we caught, and he spent a year with a collar on collecting data for us. And these These are the individual links. These are the links that we are going to learn from. That's kind of how I like to think of this research is we are learning from these individual links. We're letting them tell us what they need. So the challenge of it, to start with, we've got to just access this high elevation study area in the wintertime. So we use snowmobiles, and most days we feel really lucky that this is the kind of place that we get to work. But snowmobiling, frankly, can be really difficult and a pain. We spend a lot of time getting stuck in the snow. So here's again my friend and colleague Anna Makowitz, and she has just absolutely buried her snowmobile in the snow. So we spend a lot of time out in the field digging the snow around our sleds out, or tipping our sleds back over after they've flipped, which for me, being a smaller person is not always easy. It takes a lot of heaving and hoeing before we finally can get stuck. And again, poor Anna took the brunt of that one, but we did get out. So just accessing the study area can be really challenging. Then there's the actual capturing of a lynx. Our study area is almost 175,000 acres, and there's maybe 15, maybe 20 lynx. We're not really sure. But the point is that this is a rare endangered species. They are few and far between, which makes capturing them extremely difficult. The first step to capturing a lynx is to just find a spot on that 175,000 acre landscape that they use somewhat regularly. And so we use tracks in the snow to identify those places. Here's a spot shown here where a lynx sort of paced back and forth, and it was perching on the side of the road, looking down off the side for snowshoe hares. So potentially a great spot to capture a lynx. Spoiler, we set a trap there and didn't catch a lynx there. So once we know that we're in a spot that's frequented by lynx, then we set our trap. Our traps are made of PVC pipe. They're wrapped with chicken wire, and then there's a door in the front that slides down. And then it's a little bit of a Rube Goldberg, but it works really well. So in the back of the trap, where that's me in the brown coat, I've crawled to the back of the trap. There's a trip line of fishing line that when that gets bumped, it is connected to a mouse trap that's mounted on the top of the trap. And when that gets triggered, it releases the door. So once we've got our trap ready to go, and we're in a spot where we know lynx frequent, we place the trap on the snow, we sort of nestle it in, and then we cover the sides and the tops of it with boughs. That gives them some thermal protection. It gives them some comfort because they don't feel exposed. And it's just got sort of that intrigue of a little nook or cranny to investigate. I think of it, I mean, I think it's a lot like when a domestic cat gets excited about a paper bag or cardboard box or whatever that's been left on the floor. We have attractants, so we are constantly at home range. It feels like looking for roadkill deer. We use chunks of this meat and we place that in the back of the trap. So the idea is to get into the back of the trap where they'll hit that tripwire. We also, you can see in the picture on the right, there's the meat hanging down in the middle, and then there's a feather to the left, and that's just a little thing to sort of twitch and in the wind and catch their eye. We also use strong smelling scent lures that are designed to appeal to their curiosity. So a curiosity lure would be something like a skunk gland lure. Um, these are very potent and they are actually made of skunk glands. I was, you could order it on Amazon. I was once told by the postmaster that the next time I came to pick up my lure, it would be out back outside of the post office. We use catnip. They love that. Then some of these lures are actually made of ground up aged carcasses, and this would appeal to them as a food item. And then some of these scent lures appeal to their territorial or breeding instincts. And so we've got squeeze bottles of lynx pea and lynx gland paste. So you can always smell us coming in winter, and it's not always nice. And then finally, and really importantly, because cats are such visual hunters, um, and anybody with a pet cat knows that, you know, a little feather or something that is shiny can get a cat pretty excited. So we play on the same behavior, like I mentioned before, in the trap, but then also in the outside of the trap, we like to set this shiny piece of bird tape and feathers, and that can hang outside the trap to catch the eye of a lynx and hopefully draw them to the area with the trap. So we throw a lot at them, but still, more than often than not, they are a cautious wild animal and they will still decide not to go in. So every day during our winter field season, we are just grinding out there, checking our traps, setting new traps, and absolutely just pulling out our hair when we see tracks from the night before that just walk right past the trap without going in. And in this video that we had set on a trap, you can see that that cat actually already had a collar, and so I wasn't quite as heartbroken that he didn't go in. But all of that hard work pays off the day that you pull up to a trap and there is finally, you've caught a lynx. This is a creature that very few of us get to see in the wild. And this is an individual animal that is going to help us learn so much of what we need to know about how to save their habitat. Their GPS collars are going to collect thousands of location points. They're going to tell us exactly what bird habitats they're using from half hour to half hour. That's how often we're getting GPS locations from their collars. Now, just a funny sidebar. So I talked a lot about how hard it can be to get them to go into the traps, but they have individual personalities. And every once in a while, a lynx will learn after it's been captured for the first time that it's actually not that bad. They can go in the trap, they get a free pound or two of deer meat, and then we'll come let them out in the morning. And this is what we call getting trap happy. Uh, it's what happened with our first lynx we caught, Mo01. He decided it was well worth getting trapped to get a free meal. And this footage here is of the 11th time that we caught him. Notice that after he grabs the bait in the back, not even the sound of the door closing causes him to let go of that bait. So it got to where we were just pulling traps out of his territory as fast as we could and moving them elsewhere because the amount of time he was spending in and around our traps was biasing his data. And he was just sort of clogging up our trapping effort. So here's another lynx that really honed in our bait and got trap happy. Now we had set here was called a pre-bait station, which is when we set a piece of deer meat out to see if there's a lynx in the area we can attract, and if so, we'll set a trap here. However, this lynx, who was already collared, found it first before any uncollared lynx and camped out at it for almost 24 hours. And so here we're seeing a snippet of him just eating and napping and just having a nice extended stay there. So this data collection is extremely tough to do, but we are fortunate to have an amazing team And over the last 3 years, we've collared 13 lynx. We've backtracked over 174 kilometers of lynx trails, found 42 snowshoe hare kill sites, and gotten hundreds of lynx trail camera detections. We haven't started our formal data analysis yet, but we are already learning so much from these lynx. So for example, we're here looking at the tripod burn, which is delineated by the black line. And the dots each represent the GPS locations that we've received so far from our 13 lynx. We've got 8 males and 9 males and 4 females. The thing to cue in on here is that when we started this study, we had no idea whether there were lynx even making a home within the tripod burn. We knew there were lynx using the burn, but we thought they might have much of their home range outside of the burn with just sections of their range within the perimeter. Instead, as you can see here, we're finding that there are lynx making their entire living within the tripod burn. In fact, between what we see here with this GPS data and additional areas full of lynx tracks that we see in the snow, we now think that this entire burn is saturated with lynx, meaning this area is back online for lynx. This is a really important finding and means that we can no longer discount burns of this age as non-lynx habitat. Mature forests are not the only landscapes capable of supporting lynx. Vast areas of young forest stands are also capable of supporting lynx. That to me says young forest regenerating megafire areas are extremely important to manage the habitat and make sure we keep this kind of habitat from reburning again in a megafire. Now, from our backtracking, we're also learning how lynx are using these burns, and surprisingly, over 90% of the kill sites that were found along backtrack trails were in these burned areas versus, say, a fire skip within the burn. And then over 50% of the kill sites were actually in high severity burn area. So this is really important too, because it shows us that within this burn, it's not just that they are able to hunt within islands of trees that didn't burn. They're actually hunting preferentially in areas that burned at high severity and are regrowing. So this is a really important finding as well. These, as I'm sure you've gathered, are a couple of snowshoe hares that were killed by lynx. And then the other really cool thing that we have found out has to do with reproduction. So when we're biologists thinking about habitat and whether it can support an animal population, we're most concerned with the females of the population and whether that habitat can support reproduction. If a landscape only provides enough food and shelter to sustain males and non-reproducing females, that population is going to eventually die off. So the habitat's got to be rich enough to support the energetically costly task of reproduction. And in fact, if you look very closely at this image that we captured with trail cameras, you notice that there's that larger adult female lynx accompanied by her not only one, but 2 kittens. That second one's sort of hiding back there. We've also got footage. If you listen closely, you can hear them meowing. We see one of our tagged male lynx traveling with a family, a female lynx and her kittens during the breeding season. I love how that's the mom there that just sits down in that little patch of sun. So we're guessing that these are his kittens and that here he was again courting that female and hopefully had another litter with her the following spring. So trail camera photos and videos like these, then along with the snow tracking and the GPS data that we're getting for our collared females, show us that this megafire landscape of our study area supports not only lynx, but reproducing lynx. So again, it just heightens that importance of understanding how lynx are using these megafire landscapes so that we can manage them to reduce the risk of rebirding. This is just the beginning of what our data is going to tell us. Now that we know that lynx can make a living on a megafire landscape after some years of recovery, we feel like this is a really urgent area to protect. And so managers have got to be able to reduce fuels on this landscape with prescribed fire to slow the spread and intensity of these future reburns. This is how we can conserve lynx habitat over the long run. But again, these treatments have got to be done in such a way that they don't degrade the current habitat so much that the lynx now can't make a living. And so the details of how to manage this balancing act are going to take some deep analysis into our data. But this is the final step of our Lynx and Wildfire project, and one that we're going to be beginning soon here. That's the next stage we are headed towards. Megafires are not going to stop. And so without intentional forest treatments, they will keep increasing. And this is why this work is so it's serious. It's serious to us. And it's also why I want to thank you guys for coming and for listening today, because the North Cascades, boreal forest, and Canada lynx are facing these growing threats from these human-caused increases in wildfires. But addressing this challenge requires not only a deep understanding of wildfire ecology and the historical role of fires in different forest types, and the complexities of modern fire management, we need to move forward with this rigorous research and informed policy. And then we need the public support to develop these sustainable solutions. And so, as communities that live in the Pacific Northwest, I'm always so grateful that people are interested enough to learn about this. And so, hopefully, we can all come together to work on lynx conservation and keep these just incredible critters into the future and for the generations to come. So thank you for watching this talk, and I'm more than happy and eager to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Carmen. I learned so much. I've always wondered why the fires are getting worse and worse every year. And yeah, thanks for laying that out. And I always thought lynx were so amazing, but they're kind of those mystical creatures. The fact that you get to see them every year is like in person is just really neat for me. We're going to do question and answers. So if anyone has any questions, please drop them into the chat and we'll go through them as they come in. I had a question, like I had a few, but I had a question about your trap happy cats.
Yeah.
How far away do you set those traps up that they find each other? Because I'm guessing they have like their own middle, like mini territories within that space, right?
Yeah, so they have their own home ranges. And so once it's taken a year or two to sort of feel out what's the size of their home ranges, what are sort of likely boundaries of their home ranges. We've gotten pretty good at, okay, we caught a lynx there and he's trap happy. We need to get out of here. We can sort of estimate, all right, we need to go 2 ridges over and then we'll be in somebody else's territory probably. We also have camera data that helps us identify where those individuals are going. But yeah, it can definitely be a little dance sometimes where maybe you think you got far enough away and then all of a sudden, oh, look, there he is again, waiting for me to let him out with a full belly.
How fun. How often, like, how are you doing these like months apart from each other or seasonally apart from each other? Um, where you can get one cat in one spot and the cat.
So we've done 3 seasons of trapping. We're just about done with that. And so each year we deployed 4 to 5 lynx collars. And so from January through March or whenever the snow melts, we'd be out there every day trapping. Um, we have 2 more collars that we'd like to deploy, and that's because 2 of the female lynx that we collared last winter were predated. And so we have these collars that are available to collect more data. And so we'll try to get those out this fall and just a little sort of targeted, hopefully short little effort.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Yeah, great. What predates on them?
Great question. And that's been sort of that was not going into this, a focus of our research. Of course, when you have a mortality event with a collared rare creature like this, it's always valuable to get out there as fast as you can and see if you can figure out what happened. And so for the mortalities that we have had over the years, that's exactly what we've done. Um, it's all very anecdotal at this point, but we are surprised at the number of lynx that have been killed by coyotes. And the reason we're surprised is that that fluffy snow that I was talking about, usually in most areas of lynx range would pretty well exclude coyotes from the lynx zone. They also will just punch right through that snow if it's deep and fluffy enough. um, there seems to be some sort of breakdown in that niche separation between lynx and coyotes here in the North Cascades. And so we've actually had more coyote, well, other areas that I've contacted that have had collared lynx have not experienced predation from coyotes. And so um, that's one of the reasons, one of the unanticipated sort of reasons that research like this is so important, because there's going to be additional patterns and information that you notice just by being out there, and that's what leads to the next questions and, ooh, this is worth looking into, or this is something we hadn't even thought of that could be helpful for conservation if we knew. So, um, yeah, basically, long answer to your question. Um, we're seeing coyote predation here, but certainly cougar predation would not be unheard of. And in areas that have robust fisher populations, so namely I'm thinking of Maine in the Northeast, that population gets predated by fishers, which is pretty fascinating because a fisher is about half the poundage of a lynx, but they're very tenacious.
Wow, very cool. Thanks.
Yeah.
We have a couple questions in the chat.
Mhm.
Mark asked, isn't there at least one environmental group bringing in lynx from Canada to the North Cascades?
Very close. Yeah. So Conservation Northwest is participating in an effort that's led by the Colville tribe to reestablish a population in the Kettles Range. So that's east of us here. It historically had lynx in it. It hadn't had a breeding population since probably, don't quote me on this, but like I think maybe the 70s were some of the last times there were even records of lynx there. Um, and so they are bringing lynx in from BC. This is year 3 or 4 of them doing that. And at this point, this spring, they had their first documented reproduction from that effort. So that's really exciting. So this is an important conservation effort because it's nice to not have all of our eggs in one basket. Unfortunately, the kettles are quite small, so it's not a lot of real estate. but as many places we can have lynx, the better. So that's been a really neat effort. Our population here in the North Cascades is still connected for lynx. So we've had one of our collared lynx just whoop bop up to BC for a couple days and then come back. And so, we can assume that we get exchange between our population and BC.
Great. Thanks. Are you able to ID individuals based on physical appearance?
Oh man, I wish that we could do that easily. Yeah, you're probably thinking about studies that use trail cameras and can use the spotting patterns on, say, jaguars to tell lynx apart, or sorry, jaguars apart, and know the different individuals. That is a trick with lynx. It can be done, but they have a pretty weak spotting pattern. The best place to see them are on their inside of their front legs, but even there it can be pretty difficult. A study recently here in the North Cascades um, did their best with that, and they had like a dual camera setup. So one was on one side of the trail, the other was on the other side of the trail to try and increase the number of photos they got of each leg. They were able to identify some individuals, but it's just the spotting signature just isn't strong enough to be able to do that easily. We have some links end up with a sort of a, I don't know what the name of the specific melanistic condition is, but sometimes they'll have different white toes, whereas normally their toes are gray. And so in certain spots, we can recognize individual lynx because of those funny white toes, but otherwise, it's pretty difficult.
Another question is, where do lynx go in the summer? Oh, I missed one.
Great question. They stay in the same spots pretty much. Some studies have found that they may shift the exact habitat types that they use a little bit, but previous work that I've done here didn't find much of a seasonal shift of those habitats, and certainly not a shift in their home range location. So they stay in the same areas during the summer. Yeah.
Great. Um, do you take the collars off at some point?
Yeah, really interesting. So collar technology has come a long way. It's super cool, and it's something that at home range, I could go on about this for a long time, but safe trapping and handling ethics are really important to us. And part of that is making sure that that collar is not going to impede them, and making sure that that collar is going to come off. Fortunately, these days, collars are equipped with what's called a blow-off device. And so it's this tiny little box at the attachment point that you program to, on a certain date and time, it has just a teeny tiny little explosion inside of it and releases the bolts or whatever that are holding the collar on. And so we programmed all of our collars to release about a year and a half after we put them on them. And so that one day will just boop, pop off and the lynx can go on its merry way.
Yeah, thanks. If you have, do you recollar cat lynx after, like if they come back to a trap the next year, do you recollar them?
We have not done that. We've avoided doing that simply because the better spread of links we can get across our study area, the better let's see, the better sample we will have of how lynx are using the habitats in the study area. Um, yeah, so it's better data to collar more individuals rather than a couple individuals over and over again.
Thank you so much. Does anyone else have any more questions? What do you only work with lynx, or do you have others that you are studying as well?
So lynx are what are consuming me right now and consuming home range, at least our research arm right now. Our community science arm of the nonprofit is doing a black bear coexistence study where basically community scientists go out each summer and walk transects that we have around the valley to record data on how the natural foods, those berry crops like serviceberry, chokecherry, etc., are doing. And that's because studies have found that years when natural food availability is low, so those berry crops fail, which is happening more and more with climate change, that bears are more willing or yeah, basically more willing to go into human spaces. And so if we can track that a bit, it can help us uh, sort of predict human bear conflict years. And it's also just a really cool way to um, involve people in this research, this bear research, and sort of educate folks on how to be bear wise and sort of pull our socks up here in the valley as we have more and more bears coming into human spaces. So some bear work. And certainly, you know, in the future, after this project, we could go in another direction or we could stay in the links vein of research. But yeah, it's certainly something that I'm pretty passionate about and hope to keep learning about throughout my career.
Um, Wonderful. Thank you so much. I found this so fascinating and interesting. And I really appreciate you being here tonight. Um, Thank you everyone for being here. If you have more questions, please send them on to me and we can forward them to Carmen and hopefully get some answers for you in the future if something comes up. We will also be sending a follow-up email if there's anything, feedback or thoughts that you all have. Um, we are wrapping up the end of this year with our program, so we only have a couple classes left, but we are heavily into preparing for next year. So if anyone has any thoughts and things that they want to learn more about, please send them in a response to either email, the one that you got on Monday to tell you about this class, or our follow-up email, because we'd love to learn what you are interested in learning about. Um, please check out our website and hopefully we will see you again in our next class. I'm going to end the recording now. Thank you all for being here.